Hi, this is Dan Wallin with Interface Technical Training. In this video tutorial, I'm going to walk through a few of the new features in Visual Studio 2008, and there are many new features, so I won't have time to cover all of them here, but we'll walk through a few of the things you'll see with the editor, and we're going to talk about one of the more exciting controls, especially if you're an ASP.NET developer, and that is the linked data source. So to get started, let me go ahead and create a new website. This much like you would have in Visual Studio 2005. And you'll notice right away that we get a split view now. So I can now edit not only in design view, but also in source view all at the same time, which is super nice if you're adding CSS styles or just want to tweak the HTML a little bit as you're working with it. So what I'm going to do in this example is I'm going to hit the Northwind database, and I'm going to use a data context class to do that, and then bind against that using a new control available to ASP.NET developers called the linked data source. So let me go ahead and just run over to design view, and we're going to come back to this. The first thing I'm going to do is create a new item, and this is something you'll see that's brand new in our templates, and it's called a link to SQL classes. And so I'm going to call this northwind.dbml, and this is going to generate this data context class I just mentioned, which will in essence create our model or our data entity classes, and we'll be able to map that against our SQL code without actually writing any C# or VB.NET code ourselves. So a very productive way for getting data out of the database into custom objects. So let me add that. It's going to ask me if I'd like to stick this file in the app code folder, which I would. And in just a moment, it's going to bring up a designer, and this designer will now allow me to drag on my tables. I can drag on store procedures to make methods and do a lot of other cool stuff right here. So I'm going to run off to the Northwind database. I'm going to drag on the customers table. Now you notice right off the bat it was smart enough, it took off the S because this represents a single customer. So that's kind of nice. You don't have to at least type that. But it automatically read all the fields in the database and converted those into properties for us. And so now we have a strongly typed class we can use, and we can map against this using link. So in this example, since it's going to be pretty basic, that's all I'm going to do in this designer. So let me go ahead and save this guy. All right, now what I'm going to do is drag on just a few basic controls. So the first one I'm going to drag on is a drop-down list. The drop-down list control itself, I'm not going to do a whole lot except for show countries. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a data source. And you'll notice what you've seen before in Visual Studio 2005, but you'll notice a new entry called link, and this is our link data source. So this will automatically map our SQL queries to that customer object that you just saw me create in our data context class, which incidentally was called Northwind data context. So we'll hit OK, and then notice it picks my data context class as the source of what I'm going to query through. And because the Northwind database isn't exactly the most normalized, I'm going to go ahead and group by country here, because I just want to show all the distinct countries and bind those. So you'll notice it's going to show country for the data field and the data text field. All right, so that's first step. Next thing I'm going to do is drag on the good old grid view control. Give it a little bit of format. And again, we're going to choose a data source. I'll pick a linked data source and go through the Northwind data context. But now what I want to do is I do want to select from my customer object, which you can see here. I don't want all the fields or the properties in this case, since we're binding against an object. So we'll just select a few here for fun. And I want to do this where the country is equal to the control, which is the drop-down list control, that has our country values. Let's go ahead and add in that constraint, that where clause, that expression. And when we get done here, I'll jump into the HTML and show you kind of how this looks as far as the linked data source goes. All right. And we'll go ahead and enable selection so that we can click on a row and get a little more details about this particular row. All right. Another nice thing is as you switch between design and source, it's nearly instantaneous now, which with Visual Studio 2005 definitely wasn't always the case. So, all right, next thing I'm going to do is, well, first thing I'm going to do on this grid is make sure we have a data key names. So I'm going to add a customer ID since that's our key from our database. All right. The final control I'll drag on is a details view control. So we'll go ahead and add this, give it a little format. And again, we're going to select the linked data source. So I'm going to query against that same object, but this time, as far as the customer object goes, I want to show one customer, and I do want to show everything, so I'm going to leave the star in this case. And we want to say where customer ID equals the value in the grid view control. So let's go ahead and add that in. All right, now by default, it's not enabling insert and update on this linked data source. So if I do want to do that, it's all built in, and you actually go to a similar place you used to on the SQL data source. So if I go back to configure, you'll notice an advanced button, which is not new, but it does have new items in it. So we can enable this linked data source to automatically handle our deletes, our inserts, and our updates if we'd like. I can go to the details view control and go ahead and enable inserting, editing, and deleting to add the link buttons. All right, now assuming I didn't miss anything in our code there, let's go ahead and fire it up. And we should hopefully get Argentina as the first country. And there you see we have our first set of data. So we can go ahead and select as you'd expect. Select a particular item. Can edit it, change that to 2, and you can see that the update takes, and I would have to still, just like with version 2 of ASP.NET, I would need to refresh my grid, so we could handle the updated event to do that, but you can see it does take. Go ahead and fix that back. All right, so let's take a look at the code real quick. So looking at the source view here, let's go to the grid view, and you'll see that I have my linked data source for my grid view, my context type name, but what's interesting down here is this select. We're selecting a new object, and the properties we want to create are customer ID, company name, and a few others you can see. But we have a where clause, and we only want to fill this data where the country equals this parameter country. And that's defined using a new tag called where parameters. And so it's much like the SQL data source of old where you'd have the insert parameters, the update parameters, and the delete parameters. Well, now we have this where parameters. And same thing goes for our details view control. If we look down at its linked data source, it also has a where clause here. And we have our where parameters. So a really nice new control makes it very easy to do ORM mapping and be able to map our SQL right to our objects without writing all that code. You can see that in the editor, we can easily move around to different items and edit in both views, and they sync up, and really, really nice. Save a lot of time. Now, some other new things. Scott Guthrie just had a really nice post recently at weblogs.asp.net/scottgu. If you don't read his post, I'd highly recommend it. And he has some style sheet examples of the new style sheet editor. Now, I'm not going to demo this right now, but for those using CSS, which is hopefully about everybody doing ASP.NET, there's a great style sheet editor now, and shows the properties, shows the overrides, all kinds of cool stuff. And I could go on and on. There are just tons of cool new features in 2008. Now, one thing I didn't show when I created the website that's extremely cool, because you can start using Visual Studio 2008 right now, even on your 2.0 projects, and that is when I created the website, I didn't show up top, we can say which version of the framework. Now, because I used the linked data source, I had to use the 3.5 framework, But let's say I just had an ASP.NET 2.0 project, but I want to leverage all these cool new CSS and other features, split view and so on and so forth, in Visual Studio 2008. Well, I can do that. And you can open up existing 2.0 projects, work with them in 2008, and not worry about it putting dependencies to the new 3.5 framework. So you can still deploy it to production, works as expected. So that's an extremely cool new feature for those that have had multiple virtual machines set up just to have old versions of Visual Studio. Then you won't have to do that going forward now. They're going to go backwards to 2.0, you can see. That's another cool new feature. So that's it for now. Check back. I'll do some more videos on some of the other new features, and there's many in Visual Studio 2008. And thanks for watching.